Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mitch Taco Bell. I'm your host with Tall Tales with Taco. I've got a little sore throat after a week up at Oshkosh, which was just incredible. If you guys had a chance to go look, Kyle Carpenter, I escorted Kyle Carpenter, who's a corporal, retired out of the Marine Corps, Medal of Honor recipient, and General Pat Brady, who was a dust off pilot in Vietnam. And I had the honor of taking care of these two gentlemen up at Oshkosh, the largest air show in the world. If you have never been there, highly recommend it. Better have great walking shoes because there are nothing but miles and miles of really cool airplanes to see. And the highlight of the whole trip for me was to see the expression in the face of Kyle when the air boss who runs, he was actually one of four air bosses. He was a Marine, and he runs the air show and he goes, Kyle, is there anything I can do for you? And Kyle, he's just a really humble, shy guy, goes, oh, shucks, thanks. I appreciate it. And I'm like, I'm not going to let this opportunity pass. Air boss, what about a chance for a ride in the back of a P-51 with Kyle? And he looked at Kyle, and Kyle's eyes kind of lit up and done. Next thing you know, got a text, get Kyle out to the airport at 7:15, and off we go. He flew Bud Anderson's beautiful P-51, and it was just a fantastic time. So if you go back to the channel, you'll watch. I have that video uploaded. Tonight, we're not talking airplanes, but we are talking submarines. Now, mind you, I have covered a whole spectrum of military occupations and jobs, whether it be a U-2 pilot, SR-71 guy, F-14, you name it. But we have never spoken to a submarine guy. And Andy and I, we go back to when we were 19 years old. We were escorts for a debutante ball in downtown DC. As a matter of fact, the night that I saw Top Gun was in Annapolis on May 26th of 1986, May 16th. It was in May of 1986. And my sister had gone to the ring dance with Andy up at the Naval Academy. So my mom had nothing to do, and we went and watched Top Gun. Life-changing movie. Of course, I'd already signed my air contract, so there I was. But Andy went on to graduate from Naval Academy in '88. He went and became a fast attack boat submarine guy, nuclear fast attack, just all sorts of really cool stuff. Then he got out of the Navy. He became a lawyer, went back into the reserves, and now he's a two-star admiral. So without further ado, Admiral, welcome aboard, boss. And I'll be upfront. All views and opinions and statements by Andy Burcher does not reflect that of the United States or the United States Navy. Did I cover all the stuff for the JAG?
You did. Good job. Thanks, man. Great to see you.
Man, you too. Brother, when we were sitting there talking about all of the cool stuff that you've done in your career, and I had to stop you because I'm going, well, this is perfect. We can talk about this on the show. What is it? Let's start off. You graduate from the academy, and then you pick fast attack subs. Was that like a super hard thing to get, or was ballistic submarines more preferable? The big boomers.
So that selection process actually occurs when you were at nuclear power school. You put in a wish list of the platform that you want to go to, and then they kind of try and meet your preference. So you first get selected for nuclear power, the nuclear power program at the Naval Academy, and then the submarines. So that selection process is a combination of you're wanting to do it, coupled with academics in an engineering field, coupled with an interview at naval reactors. And based on that selection process, you then get chosen to go into submarines.
Well, what was your major? Were you an engineering?
I was a mechanical engineer. Yep. So that.
And is that what they want? Is that what they're looking for?
Well, they generally like the science disciplines because the main focus of nuclear power school is obviously learning to manage and operate the nuclear power plant that drives our submarines. And so they'd like for you to have a very good technical competence because the nuclear submarine and the fact that we have a nuclear power plant is critical to our national defense because our maritime strategy is we take the fight to the enemy,
Right.
and so without a nuclear power plant to drive our ships, our submarines covertly under the ocean, out away from the homeland, it's really would be difficult to do that with a diesel submarine, which is much slower and cannot last and stay underwater as long. So anyway, that's a long way of saying that the selection process at the Naval Academy is first for the nuclear power program, which equates to going to submarines, and then you put a wish list of your platforms in when you're at nuclear power school.
So is it like flight school? It was based off three things, based off your grades, based based off what you want, needs of the Marine Corps, and what you want.
Yeah. So yeah, it is definitely based on the needs of the Navy, and they try and align your desire. So, there are really only two platforms, right? There's
Aircraft carrier
submarines. Well, there's fast attack submarines, and then there's ballistic missile submarines in the submarine part, and then there's also, there are surface nuclear plants, but that's only in the aircraft carriers, and that's a very limited subgroup of the people that go to nuclear power school. And then, so it's mainly geographic desire and platform desire. So, we have, bases in, New London, Connecticut, Norfolk, San Diego, Bremerton, Washington, Hawaii, and then 4 deployed in Guam. So those are the kind of options that you get, and you just rack and stack those, and then they select them.
Well, we were kind of talking. My dad, when he was in destroyer school in 1960, they would take the grads and they would take them down if they were Naval Academy guys like you and engineers, and they would interview with Rickover.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever hear stories? How was your interview? Do they still do they saw off? Rickover was famous. He would saw one piece of the chair, so the guy would sit in it, and his chair wouldn't work, and would be off kilter, and just to add a little pressure to the interview, I guess.
There are a lot of Rickover stories. I don't know how many of them are true or how many of them are just folklore. But I had when I interviewed, Admiral Rickover had retired, and it was Admiral McKee that I interviewed with, and it wasn't quite the same mental gymnastics that you hear about with Admiral Rickover, but it was still a challenging interview because they want to see how you respond to questions in a pressure environment. So one of the questions that they ask you math problems, and imagine doing a math problem, knowing that your career selection process is on the line here and how you react. And I think the question that I got was a very simple one. Tell me the area between 2 concentric circles. And I sat there for like a few minutes, and I was like trying to remember what a concentric circle was. Okay. So I, I got over that initial butterfly hurdle, I was able to solve the problem relatively easily, but it was just knowing the definition of a concentric circle was a little bit.
Did they go, hey, here's a pen, go to the whiteboard here, start drawing,
Exactly. That's exactly what they did. So anyway, but so that's part of the process, and the process is to see how you think on your feet and make sure you're just not a complete bookworm, because there's this fine balance in being very technically competent, but also being a good
leader.
So that's sort of what they do in a very generic sense.
So when you selected though, and you got fast boats, and that kind of like fighter jets for submarine guys, I would think.
Yeah,
I mean, I've watched October those.
Honestly, the submarine that I was on was the USS Alexandria, and so named after Alexandria, Virginia. And the reason that I selected that was my choice, but also at the time that the USS Alexandria was being built, I was in nuclear power school, and so my parents were at a party at a friend of ours' house, the Redmonds in Alexandria, along with the mayor, and they happened to, and the CEO of the Submarine was coming and doing a sponsorship thing, and they all got together and said, "Boy, wouldn't it be a great idea if Andy went to the USS Alexandria?" And so, that's where I ended up going. So
So good idea, ferry over a couple cocktails, got you by name onto a brand new sub as a plank owner, which I think is really cool.
yeah,
Do you still have a memento? Did they give you
absolutely,
something?
absolutely do. I got a big old certificate that says Lieutenant J.G. Burcher, plank owner of USS Alexandria. So
Oh, dude, that's so cool. So you go to your first duty assignment. What are you as a JO? What's your job on board the ship?
So in new construction, you mainly in anytime you go to a submarine, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to qualify as an engineering officer of the watch on the submarine, because um, it's critical for you to understand the operations of the nuclear power plant in order to then move, what we call move forward, or move to the front of the boat and do the officer of the deck sort of thing. So your
Right.
first qualification is engineering officer of the watch. So what happened to me was, because the ship was still in new construction, I kind of showed up at the ship, and I got immediately sent out to sea on another fast attack submarine, the USS Dallas, famous from Hunt for Red October, right? And so
Oh yeah.
this was the beginning of the. This was just before the Gulf War won, and we did a deployment to the Mediterranean, and I spent 5 months, tooling around the Mediterranean across the Atlantic, doing a Cold War mission set, and learned how to be the engineering officer of the watch at the same time doing other things. And then I came back to the submarine and fully qualified engineering officer of the watch, and then I did the process of completing the submarine being built. One of which is bringing the nuclear power plant critical for the first time. I was what's called an initial crit engineering officer of the watch. And then
Wow.
I took the ship to basically right before it did its first deployment. So
So that was another Rickover thing. So back in the day, the subs, from what I've read, the rehab or the refurbishment jobs weren't up to snuff, and the commanders were complaining to Rickover that, hey, these guys, the refit, it's worse than when it went in. And so he turned around and said, the CEO and president of all the companies that do the work on my subs have to take the first dive. And, and after that, the quality went up. Um,
well,
did
well,
they
I,
do that with yours?
so they don't go on the submarine, but naval reactors do. The Admiral Rickover's equivalent at that time, when the USS Alexandria went out for its initial sea trials, Admiral Bruce DeWars was on board, four-star admiral,
Mhm.
and he came back into the engineering plant and watched us do engineering drills. And there I was as a lieutenant junior grade, the most junior, engineering officer to watch, standing next to this very crusty, four-star admiral, and it was rather intimidating. It's more
Did
hard
he
to
ask
look at myself now as a two-star admiral and think that I'm intimidating looking compared with back then, but maybe
Well, you're a tall guy too. How tall are you?
I'm about 6 feet, so I'm not super tall, but it's funny. I do when I do go and with my submarine crowd, I am taller than a good
Yeah.
percentage of them. So
Ever
it's
bump your head when you're running through the stuff?
no, it's about made right for my height. Guys that are above 6'2" tend to have some dings in their head. I had a navigator that was 6'4", and he walked around with a hat on just because he hit. So the submarine, the ceiling and the passageways carry a lot of cables, and
Right.
they have these like metal bars that hold the cables up, and they're sharp, and you can get your head hit on them pretty badly. So anyway,
And speaking of that, on a sub, do you have a full-time doctor, like an actual doctor? Or did they just put a PA or a doc, a medic on there?
We have a corpsman,
Corpsman?
and
That's
the
it?
corpsman
Wow.
is, relatively well trained. The corpsman that we had on the Alexandria was a Vietnam vet, and had done combat, medical sort of things. So it was, he was, he had gotten out and come back in, and so he was pretty old. But it was, what, he was probably about the 20-year point. So
Well,
that's
I mean, what if you're out on a mission and a guy comes down with appendicitis? Do you and you can't really surface in a helo anywhere because you're out in the middle of nowhere. You're out days from Diego Garcia, say. So I mean, can he surface at least talk to somebody and pull up YouTube and see how to remove an appendix? How to
so they're
you ever have
trained
that?
to do certain emergency surgeries on on those sort of things if necessary. I mean, they would rather get the person into port. Depending on what they're doing, they'll come off mission and contact their squadron and let them know that they're having this issue, and then they'll do what's called a human evacuation, and
Right.
they'll either it's very hard to airlift somebody off of a submarine. It's very dangerous, especially out in open ocean. And the reason it's dangerous is the swells and the rocking are can wash over the top of the submarine pretty easily. And you don't really want to do it from the sail. I mean, that's a very hard thing. It's a very complicated thing. So you'd much rather do a boat transfer in some fashion in calmer waters. So they'll come off station and do the medevac, and then they'll go back to whatever they were doing. So that's the general process.
Yeah, I wondered about that because I was reading up on the USS San Francisco,
Hmm.
and when that sub hit the underwater mountain, the volcano, the corpsman ended up getting a Navy comm or something, but he had treated all these guys, and I was sitting there thinking about it. Don't have a doctor on board, so it was a corpsman working on these guys. Wow, that's a lot of responsibility for the doc. It
It is.
really is.
It is. But they're trained. There are also decisions that the commanding officer is involved in terms of whether he can do something or not. It's that
Right.
it gets complicated because you're talking about somebody, somebody, it's a complicated thing. So
Well, let's talk life on the sub.
sure.
Just day to day. You move in as a young JO. Do you have a hot rack with another guy, or do you have a little tiny bunk with a little locker you can put some stuff in?
So
What's
the
the
submarine
kind of
that I was on was the Los Angeles class submarine. So, we had the Los Angeles class, we had the Seawolf class, and we had the Virginia class, and we're building the Columbia class. So, on the Los Angeles class, you have what's called the 9-man bunk room, which is where most of the junior officers go, and
right?
it's you get a rack as officers, and probably no more than 20% of the people hot rack, and that's the very junior enlisted that tend to do that. So you get assigned a bunk, and bunk is your little private area. It really is just a bed with a bedpan underneath that you can put your items in, and you have a little locker that you can store your other uniforms in, usually sharing in some fashion with somebody else. And then as you kind of get more senior, you become more of if you're a lieutenant, you'll have a stateroom that you share with 3 people.
It's better
And
than 8. Yeah.
yeah, no, but it's interesting. So this is a good story. So when I would get underway, I used to love drinking Mountain Dew because I needed one soda a day to keep me going. I didn't really drink coffee. So
Right.
I would bring 2 cases of Mountain Dew on board the submarine, and I would put it underneath my mattress. So my mattress was level. And each day I would take a Mountain Dew out, drink it, wash the can out and put it back on, and then sleep it so everything stayed level. So those are the little type of luxuries that we have to deal with. So
Now, I mean, the sub is making water. So is there a time limit for showers? How big are the heads? Is it
uh, so
because you've got how much? 130 people or something, right?
130, 140 people, about 12 to 15 officers, 120, enlisted crew. Uh, there's the officer stateroom area has one shower with one commode. The enlisted have two sinks and two showers that they can utilize, and then the chiefs have a shower the goat locker has a shower and a sink, and then the captain and the executive officers share that, and that's it.
So there's not a whole lot, man. And you do you still got to do the 3-minute showers on board.
Well, so what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to wet yourself down and then turn the water off, lather up, soap yourself, and then use the water and then turn the water back on to wash yourself off, as opposed to having it constantly, run. So when people let it run, we call it hotel showers, but the idea is, so we make our own water, or make our own fresh water, and the more you use, the more you have to deal with both disposing of the water that you used and then also making more water.
Don't they just dump it overboard? You're in a thing called the ocean, right?
Yeah, they do, but that makes noise, right? And so
I didn't think about that.
One of the main reason that submarines stay covert is people can't hear them. But if you're either so the way that you push what are called sanitary tanks, basically your drain waste vent, your sump,
right?
The way that goes off of the ship is that it's either pumped or blown off of the ship. Pumping takes a longer period of time, and it causes a pump to run, right? So, the less
makes noise. Sure.
Yeah, it makes noise. And then you can do it quickly, but you pressurize the tank and you just blow it off. And so, but that makes a bigger noise. So those are the kind of trade-offs that you have. So
I was going to ask about that. All right. That's coming up next, air for the ballast, but air to breathe. Nuclear reactor. What do you guys have? Like scrubbers in same air?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have CO2 scrubbers that scrubs the CO2 out of it. You have an oxygen generator, and those two create a balance, between creating good oxygen air and then scrubbing off of the carbon monoxide out of the system. It basically converts it to water and discharges it off of the submarine. So
what's the sub smell like when you go down there? Smell like a gym locker, or does it have a particular smell? Like go on a ship, it smells like oil and paint.
Yeah, it's the submarine stink. I mean, it infuses into everything, and it's a combination of the oil, with all the mechanics, all the various different things that go into the systems. There's amine that the scrubber uses amine in some fashion, or you have amine canisters which can convert the CO2 to oxygen. And so the bottom line is your clothes stink and everything. You just put that stuff.
But you get used to it, right?
Oh, yeah,
you just get used to it. You can't smell it.
No question. Yeah, you get used to it. So
you get down there and everyone's like, "Don't worry about it, Andy." You get used to it after about a week. Everybody stinks. Everybody smells. You never know.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Until you come home to your wife and you say, "What the hell is that?"
Well, yeah, you just put that stuff, and the clothes that you bring with you are basically ruined. You just put those aside, and those are
save them for the next deployment.
Exactly.
Hey, are you able to do laundry? I mean,
that
makes noise.
Yeah. No, I mean, you have to choose your time, right? I mean, But yes, there's laundry facilities. It's only one. Everybody uses the same thing, and there are various different hierarchies on who has to do people's laundry. But generally we have our laundry done for us. The officers do in some fashion, just because they don't want us operating the laundry machine on the submarine.
Well, do you wear normal uniform of the days, relaxed camis
They they
nowadays?
they wear a poopy suit is what it's basically coveralls is what they wear. You'll see a lot of the pictures with NWUs. Well, that's a more formal picture.
Yeah,
That's when somebody's visiting. So that's and that's somebody visiting too. But those are the NWUs. But
he looks like a cob. He looks
yeah,
like the cob. I kick your butt. Come here, son.
yeah, I can't tell. But anyway, yeah. So um, the NWUs, we have the issue that they're not quite fire retardant, and
Right.
so that's why we have to wear a fire retardant uh, submarine equivalent of a flight suit.
No kidding. Okay, so you get to wear the. Is it green like ours, or is it blue?
It's
It's blue.
blue.
So you fall in the water off the ship. They can't find you.
If we're falling off in the water on the submarine, we got real problems.
Hey man, hey, it happened in Hunt for Red October. The dude had the pole and he got electrocuted and fell off. Man overboard.
Yeah. Well, so you're rarely on the surface, right? You're
Right.
only surface when you're transiting from port to the dive point, and so and there are only two people that are usually up there: the officer of the deck and the lookout. And you have you actually have a harness on, and you're locked in, and you're usually wearing an orange pumpkin suit when you're in colder water. So anyway, that's what I usually wore when we were up in the North Atlantic. So
Oh, oh man, that's cool. I had a picture. Now, do you guys like the Russian submarines have a plexiglass lookout thing for bad weather or anything? Do you guys have something similar to that?
nope, no, we don't do that.
Oh, really?
No, no, the U.S. submarines don't have that. So
At all? Because I got a picture of your sub, and I'm trying to see if I can find it. A picture of your sub coming up in the under the ice,
mhm.
and actually, this one looks like it. It right down in the front. There's that gray thing. It almost looks like a viewing port or something.
That's a sonar array.
Ah, okay. And I was going to ask about the periscopes. You guys don't do the old school, you know, come up, look through the periscope anymore. Are those actual periscopes, or are those the what they call
Well,
telephotic?
some of the one of those is the periscope, and I think one of those is the radio antenna. But no, when the submarine that I was on that we built, both were hydraulically lifted, periscopes. One had more electronics on it, and one was basically a tube with glass. Things have advanced since then, and
Yeah.
the less hull penetrations that you have, the better.
Yeah.
And so now our periscopes, the design is more electronic, if you will. And so you have instead of having a moving part that goes through the pressure hull, the
Mhm.
moving part is disconnected from the pressure hull, and the only thing that goes through is electronic cables.
Okay.
So
I was going to ask about this. So here's a shot I found on the internet, and I just see a little bit of a burble there.
mhm.
Do you guys like come to a stop, raise it up, get a quick peek, and then go back down, go speed off? Or I mean, because it seems like if the periscope stuff is up, it's going to make a bigger wake, something that airplane could see. Or
Sure. Well, you try and minimize your ability to be detected, and so it depends all on what you're doing. I mean, those pictures could be an exercise in which they're actually trying to get somebody to be
Yeah.
trained to see how to observe a submarine. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty common sense that if the submarine's periscope is down, it's harder to see than when it's
Oh,
up.
no, not that. I mean, do you come to a stop, raise the periscope, get a quick peek, pop it back down, and then go to keep from having the wake?
All depends on what you're doing,
Yeah.
and all depends on where you are and what you're trying to do. So let's just use as the generic example that you are coming to periscope depth to do some maintenance, to receive message traffic, and to ventilate. So ventilation is bringing fresh air into the submarine. So those are all things that, if you're not trying to be, super covert, you can kind of do, and you'll maintain. You don't come to a stop because it's harder to maintain. It's easier. You can't
Yeah.
maintain
All right.
steerage way if you're
Right.
at an all stop. But let's say you're doing something that really needs you to be stopped. I mean, you'll be stopped, right? So
Yeah. Well, I guess it would cavitate. Well, would it cavitate the engines? I don't know, but I love this picture. There's a couple F-14s up there. Maybe that's Bill Stillwell's squadron.
yeah,
But
that's
whoever this is got a great shot down the throat of the carrier.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so in exercises, we like doing those sort of things, and that's probably some sort of an exercise picture in which, if you saw the gradations on the scope, there, as a submarine officer, you have to learn how to calculate the range based on the ship, based on the mast height of the platform that you're looking at, and the number of tick marks on the above the horizon. So I don't personally remember the formulas because it's been so long, but our junior officers would be able to tell you, well, that's X number of yards away based on that picture. So
Well, I bet he took a picture of this. I heard stories where they would send the CO a copy of the picture in the mail when they got back, said, gotcha or something like that.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
that was back when we didn't have as quite a good a connectivity. Now it's more like email. so,
they could. No, this is an old shot. I'm not sure a Nautilus class or a Scorpion class
I think that's a Scorpion class. It looks like the Scorpion.
because he's got a little bridge, for the sail, and they come out the hatch there, and there's a little. They can walk on the sail. They've got some safety wires up. Did
Yeah.
they did they find that the sails actually work better or worse, or they just got rid of them? It doesn't seem like modern
Oh,
subs
they
have
all
those
have
sails,
sales. They all have sales. It's just a question of
or
whether
not sails. The
those are
like an
called
aileron.
those are called fair water planes.
Okay.
And so when the planes are on the sail, they're called fair water planes. When
Okay.
they're under the water, they're called bow planes, and then you have the stern planes. And so uh, the each ship has a different unique design. You showed me a picture beginning, which is the Columbia class submarine, which we're going to the X the
Oh,
X,
they've got 'em.
X stern planes, and that's a design feature which gives more control of depth. So you'll see that in a lot of the new diesel submarines have the X plane design, and
Mhm.
it allows for a submarine to not have to do an angle when it's changing depth. Is the kind of the theory behind that. It can do this. It can kind of go at a level by the way that the X plane changes the depth. It
Yeah.
has a computer algorithm which then causes it to kind of go
Oh.
up and down.
So you're like this one, it didn't seem like I had a plane on that, or maybe there's not enough
That,
of.
that, that looks like a a newer Los Angeles class, and yeah, so we moved. The earlier Los Angeles class had fairwater planes, as I mentioned on the sail, like the
Yeah.
Dallas, and Alexandria had a bow plane, so they removed that.
Ah, gotcha. Well, that is just. I mean, that is awesome. The it's gotta definitely help out for going in. That was the other question I was going to ask you was the ballast.
Mhm.
So you can't exactly have a compressor running. I know they're mounted on rubber things to keep it quiet, but you can't exactly have an air compressor going to fill the submarine tanks and push the salt water out for the ballast. Do you guys have like store? They must have like not scuba tanks, but big flask or something to store the
Yeah,
compressed
they're
air,
called
right?
high pressure air tanks, so you know how the submarine works is that when it's on the surface, it has what's called ballast tanks that are full of air. Basically, think about turning a bucket upside down and put it in the water, right? You have the air that stays in that, and that gives the submarine buoyancy, when it's on the surface. But
Right.
when the submarine wants to submerge, there are these valves called the ballast tank vents, and you open the ballast tank vents, and water comes up from the bottom and pushes the air out. That's why you hear this big, and you see that going, and the submarine just starts to sink, and those fill up, and then you close those vents, and those tanks are all full of water now. So then if you're underwater and you have an emergency, you do what's called a high pressure blow, and air from those high pressure tanks rapidly floods those ballast tanks, and then that's what causes the submarine to go up very fast. Now, if you're just surfacing normally, you would do it in a low pressure fashion. You would do it kind of gradually, but that's what causes the submarine to do those big old coming out of the water sort of.
I don't. I found a picture of a World War II submarine doing that, and gosh, I don't think I downloaded that because I'm looking over at my side. I've got a million photographs. I understand that there's the USS San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Terrible.
Amazing the amount of damage that thing took, and still operated and survived no problem.
Yeah, the pressure hull did not get penetrated in that. So that's a testament to the design and the engineers that are involved in all this. It's an incredible machine. I mean,
Yeah.
they're generally the Los Angeles class submarine is 365 feet long, and it can go, the published in James is 33 knots or something like that, and that's pretty fast. I mean, think about you have you've been on a boat, like a water skiing boat, right?
Right.
Well, you know what? I water ski a lot, and I usually go 25 miles an hour. That's fast, right? Well, you're
Right.
going faster than that in a submarine. I mean, that's pretty doggone amazing that you can do that. So,
Well, I read that the Soviet top that Alpha there, that top speed was 47 knots,
yeah,
51 miles an hour. And that's to me hauling, that's hauling butt.
it is hauling butt. I mean, it is. I mean, have you been on a carrier?
No.
Yeah. So
Well, yeah, once the Lexington, but
yeah, carriers
it's
can go.
just steam.
They go. I mean, that's a city that's going 40 knots. I mean, to do air operations about 40 knots. I mean, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Simply amazing. So,
Well, I had a picture of kind of talk about can you talk about chasing alphas? I mean, is it like Hunt for Red October? Do they do the crazy Ivans? Do you guys do crazy Ivans to check your baffles? And
I'm probably not at liberty to kind of talk about that sort of stuff. But the movies are the movies, and they they highlight things, and it's fun and it's interesting. People ask me a lot, well, what's it like being underwater for that long a period of time? So the longest I've been underwater is for about 2.5 months straight,
right,
without pulling into port or doing anything. And what I tell people is, I say, go into your house, close all the windows, and your house has to be relatively small, right? You can't like have a
yeah,
million rooms, and just stay there for 2.5 months. Okay. And that's what it's like. It's like going to the office for 2.5 months. And it you have some good times, you have some bad times. It's you go a little stir crazy. You try and work out. You try and get sleep. But when you're doing something intense, I mean, you're working an awful lot. They're long hours, long days. So
Do they
it's
keep everything? Because there's a lot of computers and instrumentation. So do they keep it cold?
yep, very cool. We have a submarine sweater that you guys have your flight jackets. We have a
Yeah.
submarine sweater. That's our our sort of thing that we walk around with, and you need that sweater because it's cold. It's cold,
Yeah.
definitely. So
Yeah. I was going to say a couple blankets at night.
yeah, sleeping bag. You bring a sleeping bag on, and then you get in the sleeping bag. So
Do you really? You sleep in a sleeping bag?
yeah, it's cold.
Oh, mommy bag. You zip it up. You got your little fart hole.
well, so in the stateroom, you have a desk on one side and locker on the other, and then you have this little maybe 4 foot hole that you go into to get into your cubby, your bed. And so what I would do is I got a black towel and I taped it in front so that you have these curtains, the curtains that you see on the bunks and ships and that sort of thing. Those let a lot of light through. So you get a black towel and you put it in there, and it is like a coffin. It really is. It is that, but you can sleep pretty well in there.
So do you have to have psychological battery to make sure you can handle it? You have anybody go nutso?
It's not as bad. It's not claustrophobic. Let's put it that way.
Right.
The spaces are big enough that you don't feel, claustrophobia, or most people don't. There isn't super, at least I don't think there's super rigor on mental evaluation any more than most normal people go through. So
Well, I mean, that's kind of claustrophobic. Now, when there's a big raging hurricane storm up above and you guys are down low, say 500 feet, the currents, do you still catch turbulence? And
So
does
we
it,
were we
you
were
don't have that?
in the Bahamas one time, and a hurricane did blow through, and I could feel the ship moving at 150 feet. You could
Wow.
feel it moving back and forth at 150 feet. So that's the best indicator that I could tell you. At a certain point, the depth that you won't feel it, but 150 feet is pretty doggone deep.
Yeah, because a wave is nothing but energy.
Yeah.
So as you get a 75-foot swell up top, that's got to transition down below. And I was sitting there thinking that, like flying an airplane, water is like air,
Yeah.
in terms of you're going through something. So you could have a current. So you got a headwind, you're going slower. You may be indicating 37 knots, but your ground speed track across the ground is
I mean, the
is
Gulf Stream
less.
itself is 4 knots. I mean, it definitely impacts it. So,
Now, what about food? You're down there for 3 months. Is it get really good at first, and then it just kind of you get down to the frozen,
yep,
dehydrated? Hey, we're having chicken again.
yeah. So 30 days is about the max that you go until you start really just getting into the frozen food sort of category. Um, yeah, I mean, the limiting factor and how long you can stay under is not anything but food. I mean, food is the limiting factor. Everything else you could go really long for, but food is the factor there, and so.
I saw that they had modified some of these subs. So they got the cruise missiles, and then they have the SEAL guys on the back. The SEAL guys, is that on the Ohio class? Is that a permanent fixture that the SEAL dudes can use and transit out? I mean, is it like parasitic drag on the sub? Do you
I'm
know?
not sure I understand the question, but what the submarine that you just pointed out is we converted for the Ohio class submarines into what's called a SSGN instead of an BN, and
Right.
the idea is that converting the ballistic missile tubes into Tomahawk tubes so that they're these huge, basically TLAM platforms, and they they carry so many. They carry more inventory than any of the ships, almost combined, if you will. So
It's like a 6-cylinder rotating shooting deal. I mean, pretty impressive.
yeah, no, it is. It really is. I think it's 12, missiles per tube, and then they're 20 tubes, so it's 144 missiles. That's a heck of a lot of firepower in one platform. So
Just think in Top Gun, they go, "Oh, it's ringed by GPSs or whatever." Ah, BS, man. Some sub could launch. A couple of them are going to get through and blow up their little facility, but
yeah.
then we wouldn't have Top Gun.
One thing that I would be remiss in not saying is I don't think people really appreciate, or the general public doesn't understand how important the SSBN is to our national defense strategy. And you
Explain
really
the SSBN. That's
the ballistic missile submarine, the really big one.
big ones.
The big ones. We carry 70% of our nuclear weapons are carried on submarines.
Wow.
So you have the ICBMs, and then you have the bombers, but 70% of our nuclear capability is on submarines. And that's the number one priority of our national defense, is defense of the homeland and strategic nuclear deterrence. And the fact that rests in, for the most part, in, and the submarines are the only survivable element. In other words, because they're dispersed, in the ocean, the bombers, can get hit, the ICBM fields can get hit, but the submarines, in the event the homeland gets attacked, they will survive and are able to, counter any sort of a strike. So it's a very important concept that people don't appreciate. And that's why the Columbia class submarine that you just you showed a little bit ago is the it's a very expensive build, but it is the number one defense priority that we have.
And the technology to make it uber quiet. Now, is there any sort of Caterpillar drive? I mean, Tom Clancy talked to somebody when he wrote that book. Did they actually try that? Do you know?
Well, so what's interesting is that sort of like the Tesla, right? And the new electric cars, how quiet they are,
Yeah.
right? When you go from a combustion engine or something that uses a decrease in pressure to a different pressure, whether it be internal combustion or steam turbine or something like that, it creates noise, right? Well, an electric drive motor is, extremely quiet. I mean, think about, the Tesla, if you will, compared with the, a internal combustion engine car. They're so much more quiet, right? Or quieter. So that's the general concept of improvements that that are there. Because
go ahead.
I was just saying, our current submarines use a nuclear power plant that drives a steam engine that drives main engine turbines, which then drive the propeller. So moving towards an electric drive in which those main reduction gears are not there, but it's just it's an electric motor that has no moving parts,
No bearings.
all of that stuff. It's all just basically an electric motor is much more quiet. So that's pretty basic stuff, but it's that's where we're headed.
Well, like back in the day, all of our subs back in World War II, diesel subs on the surface, but then they had those big battery packs, and the Germans as well, to go down and crawl around at 5 knots or whatever they were doing underwater. But you couldn't hear them, could you?
Well, so World War II, the submarine was more of a surface ship because it transited faster on the surface. And then when it got to its location, it would then submerge and go really slow and get itself into position. The batteries didn't last terribly long. And so That's why you see like the surface rigging on the World War II submarines. You see the gun turret and all that
Yeah,
sort of stuff.
yeah.
Um, Obviously, we don't have a gun turret now on our submarine.
You got Tomahawk cruise missiles, right?
Yeah, but that's not shooting the airplane. That's just above you down, if you will. So,
Yeah.
so
Well, speaking of that, this has got to be the worst sight for a submarine dude to have a P3 sitting over top of you, and
yeah,
he's got you nailed.
yeah. Well, the unfortunately, the P3 has gone by the by, if you will, and we
P8, yeah.
replaced it with the P8. Totally different sort of theory, and it uses more complicated optronics to do the detection as opposed to the eyeball. So
Well, looking at that, can you tell me, is that just pretty much the mast that's making? It's not the sail. Doesn't look like the sail's up, but the
yeah,
periscope that's
because
giving
that's
the wake.
very clear water in which submarine's probably doing 3 to 5 knots, and some mast is up, and it's creating that little trail there.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I got another picture showing a typhoon. I don't know how big a typhoon is compared to our. Is the Ohio class a SSBN?
Yeah, so that is comparing it to an SSBN.
You could almost put two of those inside of a typhoon.
Yeah, yeah. So
And is the typhoon Hunt for Red October?
sorry, somebody turned the TV on, and I wanted to tell them to turn it down. So
The typhoon was what he depicted as the Caterpillar Drive type submarine for Hunt for Red October, right?
say that again.
The Hunt for Red October was a Typhoon class submarine with the Caterpillar
Oh
Drive.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
fictional,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
fictional deal.
Yep.
Speaking of that, do you guys like Top Gun? You know, they'd fine them $5 if you quoted lines from Top Gun.
Nah,
If you go one ping, Vasily, would they turn around and fine you? Or?
no, that doesn't. I don't know that. At least I don't. I haven't seen that happen. So,
Or what is a guy asked a great question that was John Stanberry, and I've got a bunch of questions here for you because this is very exciting. John Stanberry did ask 2 questions: most realistic sub movie, and what is your favorite sub movie? That's a great question.
Both. Das Boat for both.
Das Boat.
Yep. Yep.
And and I love Das Boat, and I totally left that out of my. I was remiss in my duties when I wrote up my thing. I was talking Crimson Tide and Hunt for Red October. I totally left out Das Boat when I was doing
the extended version. I could watch that. All day long. So
now, would you guys have movie night? Did you ever have a day to relax? You guys go in the wardroom and put a DVD on or something?
Yeah, if you're just doing training evolutions, Saturday night tends to be a pizza night, and then you watch a movie, and cribbage is a big game on the submarines. I don't know if you play cribbage, but we'll have cribbage games, poker night. We'll do those sort of things. Yeah, you do have periods in which Saturday or Sunday tends to be a little bit less of a harder routine, if you will, than during the regular week when you're involved in various. If you're just transiting, then it's a relatively you're in the office, but it's just moving.
Right. Well, I mean, do you guys do port starboard? Like you're on duty this 2
The
days and
general
you're
rule
off?
is a 3-section, 8-hour rotation, and the idea is you kind of stick with that. Circadian rhythm is very important. We've done a lot of sleep studies. So the idea of being 4-section and a constantly rotating, sort of time period is not quite as good. So the 3-section, 8 hours, and you just stick with that. That's that, and then you just adjust your sleep cycle, and it works well.
Would you guys have a tanning bed or something to get some vitamin D?
No.
Oh, man. Parker asked, does he know Captain Andrew Hartel, sub guy?
I sure do. He was the I think he retired, but he was the ROTC CO for the North Carolina Consortium, and my daughter graduated from NC State a year ago, and she's in flight school right now. And he was
Matter of fact, I tell you what, you and Maddie
yeah,
look awesome. She looks just like her mama. She is absolutely gorgeous. She will be just incredible, incredible
yeah. So
pilot.
she actually just started ground school on Monday, last Monday, not this Monday, but last
Yeah.
Monday. So she's down in Pensacola. So
You are a proud daddy, man. I know you are.
yeah,
My daughters make me proud, but I know seeing her in that uniform when she gets those gold wings, that's just going to be fantastic.
yeah,
I mean,
it'll be interesting.
what an honor. Let's see, I got some more here. I got a guy who served on the Benjamin Franklin.
Okay.
Yeah, Brett qualified aboard the Benjamin Franklin SSBN 640-90. All right, Brett.
Great. Well, so 1990 was when I qualified on Alexandria. When did he graduate from sub school?
Brett, if you're listening, you're still on, let us know. Let's see. Welcome to the Big D. That you're talking about Dallas, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
And what are some of the most exciting developments in submarine technology that you can, unclassified? That's
well, I mean, so in a general sense, the fact that we're um, moving into unmanned is a big development. We got to figure that out, but um, the idea of having unmanned undersea vehicles
autonomous.
is a big deal. So we can do a lot with those things. So right now we have ones that will go out and measure the environment and feed that back to us, and think about other capabilities that we have. So
Yeah, Eric kind of followed up with that. If any of the synergy does the Navy have with commercial ocean exploration communities or similar U.S. agencies?
well, the challenge is mixing a military purpose with exploration. The two kind of don't go too much together. Although we do an exercise, I think every other year called ICEX. If you look it up, there are a lot of good pictures on it. And exploration underneath the Arctic ice cap is there's a bit of science, there's a bit of exploration, and with global warming and the possible opening of the possibility of a northern transit, from the Atlantic to the Pacific is a big deal. So there's a combination of science, understanding that. Look it up. It's ICEX, and there are lots of cool pictures. There you go.
That's your sub.
Is that the Alexandria?
That's Alexandria, and it was doing a exercise with the British, and I didn't quite understand the accident that the British sub had, but it had some sort of failure of something.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I'm not sure what.
yeah, I'd have to go back and look. But now, see, that doesn't have the planes, or do the planes retract?
No, it has bow planes. So
Up on the front. Got
up on the front, and those do retract actually, and that's part of the ice package, if you will. So in order to surface underneath the ice, that whole sail area needs to be really hardened. And so certain submarines are that way. And the submarines with the fairwater planes cannot, because if you think about it, those
It'll
planes,
crush them.
well, it would just bend them. They
Right.
aren't designed. Now, some of them do turn all the way up. Some design submarines turn all the way up and they go cut through, but our subs don't do that.
Well, how do you figure out how thick that looks pretty damn thick. I mean, that's got to be a couple feet. So
Yeah.
how do you figure out, hey, you know what, that's only 3 feet thick right here, as opposed to you go up and hit a friggin' wall.
You
2
have a
feet.
sonar that goes up and you can tell your depth and pressure and all that sort of stuff. So that's how.
Oh man, that's high speed, low drag. All right, let's see. Here we go. We've got Jose said as communications tech on submarines for me was a new communications. Oh, okay, never mind. What kind of strange or unusual occurrence happens deep below the sea that most folks on dry land don't consider?
One of the interesting things is with the sonar you hear all of the noises under the water that you don't see when you're on the surface and or on the land. And when you're listening to it with the sonar, you hear all these like chirps and tweets and the biologics just eating, and doing plankton and all that sort of stuff. It's
Yeah.
really it's an interesting sound. So there's a lot more activity than you realize under the water that you can just see from the surface. It's a whole different world, it's happening all over the ocean. It's not just in close to land. So it's
Do
a
you,
pretty amazing environment.
do you get cross deck train like, hey, here, sit with Jonesy, learn how to operate sonar?
So as an officer, you learn all of those different portions of the submarine. I mean, you literally, one of the first things that you have to do is you have to physically trace and be able to draw out literally every system on the submarine and be able to name each individual valve, each individual switch, everything.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's part of what you get when you get your dolphins. So,
Wow, man, that's incredible.
yeah.
That was a great question. Eric's got all these questions. Eric's a good friend of mine. He's been on the show. He's the founder of RTAG, which is the largest aviation charity in the nation, helping out our vets. So it's a good deal. During Cold War, what was the plan for our submarines after potential limited or even large-scale nuclear exchange? Would subs have hid out and waited as a reserve deterrent? You guys are kind of on your own, aren't you? I mean, well, you get your message. You got to do what you got to do, but you're kind
So
of independent thinkers.
So what I was doing 2 weeks ago when you called me was I serve as what's called the Airborne Emergency Action Officer, and I fly on the E6B. And if you look it up, it's called Operation Looking Glass, and that plane communicates is the survivable element in the event of a nuclear war to communicate with our strategic nuclear forces. As
That's
far as
the 135 with the big whip,
no, nope, nope, it's a 707
or
with
707 with a big mile long
no, not well. Oh, it has a tail that it can drop. Yeah,
wire that
yeah,
had
yeah,
a couple of flight school buddies that flew that
yeah,
up in Oklahoma, and it had the big. It would go out a mile, and they would do a big
yeah.
circle, and they could communicate with you guys.
Yeah. So to answer the question, the submarines stand by. I mean, they're survivable, but they can't launch nuclear weapons just willy nilly on their own. I mean, in order to launch a nuclear weapon, it requires presidential authority, and so it has to receive those communications from somebody. And
Is that kind of like Crimson Tide, the whole thing behind trying to get that message down to
yeah,
find out whether, yeah,
yeah. So that's called an emergency action message, and that basically it gives them authorization to launch nuclear weapons. And there's all sorts of controls and really complicated stuff. But the bottom line is that the submarine will not be impacted by a nuclear explosion in the homeland. So
that's what somebody wrote. They'd launch a retaliatory strike against those that launched on us first. Mutual destruction. However, submarines would survive the nuclear exchange. It would kind of be like on the beach. You're
well,
Gregory
right.
Peck.
But the question is, I mean, I think the more interesting thing would be after the submarine launches its ballistic missiles, or it's told to, and it's out of Schlitz. What do you do
What do you
then?
do?
I mean, people don't appreciate this, but the world is not probably going to be destroyed by nuclear. There's going to be a lot of hurt, but there will be definitely areas that are not impacted directly. It's the indirect impacts, economic systems, the failure of the supply chain, food, electricity, water, all of those sort of things. That's going to be the real challenge if we do have something
Yeah,
like
you could be hidden down in Buenos Aires, pop the hatch. Here I am.
that.
Hello. I love that movie On the Beach. That was a really powerful movie, though. Let's see, we
Sure.
we talked about that, and yes, I know. Doug, I absolutely, you are correct. Forgot Das Boat, and get the extended version for sure. I screwed that up, man. Golly. Jose certainly asking more detailed level. Let's see. Let's see if we got anything else. Sound area, another planet. Yeah, I could see hearing all that stuff. And yeah, that's a tough mission though. We were talking about this last week. MH370 when it crashed out there, and I get it that there's not a lot of traffic, so there wouldn't be a lot of subs out there prowling around in the South Indian Ocean. But it seems like with the acoustics, somebody SOSUS somewhere would capture the pings of the initial, deal. I don't know. I'm just thinking submarines have a lot more
Well,
power than.
we talked about the Air France one that went from, I think, Brazil, was going flying from Brazil to Paris, and they found that by a ship, and you also remember a couple of years ago you had the Argentinian submarine that sunk. I was involved in the rescue efforts on that, and those were all found later by basically a surface ship doing detailed sonar surveys.
And what about the Kursk? They turned down our help, of course, to do that, but that was a torpedo that blew up or something on that. Do you recall?
Yeah, I mean they had some problem, and obviously my understanding is that they were in shallow enough water that the hull did not implode, and that there were people that survived for some period of time. So
yeah,
so one of the jobs that I had was I was Commander of Submarines Nato, and we were responsible for what's called the International Submarine Rescue Program, and so called as Merlo, and we just actually issued a brand new program. This is all unclassified. That you have a certain amount of time based on the submarine, number of people, and all that sort of stuff to do a rescue. And for the most part, like 95% of the world's oceans are in unrescuable water, because
sure.
the systems that we have can only go so deep. And think about mating with a submarine hatch at a certain depth. It's just really, really hard. So, about 1,000 feet is about all that you're going to be able to, rescue a submarine.
I was going to say, what is the deepest rescue that you know of for U.S.? I mean, we had the Thresher and we had all those guys, but there was one where we had the really deep rescue. The guys were able to rescue the guys with the bell. Do you recall? It was
Well,
back
there's one in 1930s, which was done with what's called the Submarine Rescue Chamber. And that's basically a bell, like a bucket that goes down, has air in it. It latches onto the submarine. You open the hatch, people come out. But that was in relatively shallow water, as my understanding of that. That was like up in Massachusetts.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It was the 30s. I remember that now.
Yeah. Yeah. So
submarines have always fascinated me. And Hunt for Red October, I know it was goofy, but I love that movie. And I thought Glenn, what's his name? Not John Glenn. He played the skipper of the Dallas.
okay.
That guy was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not. I can't remember who it was. So
yeah, he was a cool customer, man. This is one cool customer. I'm either sending him the digits for Playboy Playmate of the Year, or
sure.
whatever. one ping only, Vasily.
Yeah.
God, man. Yeah, I got. This is going. I got to say, Mariel, how you doing? I know she was watching earlier, and she just joined us from LinkedIn. This has been awesome. I got a couple other photos I was going to show. This is kind of cool. You on your NATO deal, sitting there hanging out with the Greeks on their submarines.
Yeah. So there are 13 countries in NATO that have submarines. Greece is one of them, and I got the opportunity to go and visit their submarine force in the fall of 2019. And this is the the Greek submarine Matrosis, and I got to go out on Matrosis and do a torpedo shoot, and it was a wonderful experience. So when you go in and out of this is where this picture is. It's the Greek submarine base, and when you go out, you go through these straits over which the Peloponnesian War was fought in like 640 something, and there are like thousands of ships underneath us as we're going out. To think about riding a submarine through that with all of these ancient ships underneath me, in a war that you read about in almost mythology is pretty,
Right.
is pretty neat.
How deep was it? I mean, the
Oh, it's
ships
fairly
are.
shallow. I mean, that strait is fairly shallow. It's not more than 100 feet. So
Now, is
you
this
stay on the surface.
obviously the Greeks don't build submarines? Is this like a German diesel?
Yeah. So there's a German 214 diesel that is so interesting. So the Greeks, I think, bought two of those hulls from Germany, but
Uh-huh.
they stopped the production because of the 2012 economic crisis that they had.
Oh yeah.
And what's amazing is that the Greeks themselves finished the submarines, and the commanding officer of this submarine actually designed the fire control system software and is able to like reprogram it. Amazing, just absolutely amazing.
And
People don't give our allies a whole lot of credit, but I have to tell you that I was so proud to be in charge of the NATO submarines, and these folks that I work with, they're super professional, super quality submariners, and we're really lucky to have the NATO alliance that we have.
now talk me through this. Their sail, you've got that little hatch. So that hatch obviously goes into some sort of. Is there a control room
No,
inside?
no,
Because it's
no.
got look like a window.
They that's just an access. You have to kind of there's internal to that. That's all kind of fills up with water when you submerge,
Uh-huh.
but there's a tube and there's a ladder that you kind of claw up, and then you go up to the top, and then you go down that tube to go down into the submarine from there.
How about the ones in the background? Are those
Those are older.
also?
Submarines, Type 209 diesels. So
That's pretty cool.
yeah.
Let's see. I got a picture of this young lad driving on the surface. Let me find it. Yeah, here we go. Look at that handsome fella.
Yeah. So that's after we've come out. That's the same trip, and that we're coming out after the out of the port, and it's basically there's Athens that just sits up on top of the hill. So if I'm looking straight at Athens right now, the Acropolis is
Right.
where my face is facing, and so
That's
pretty
really cool.
pretty cool trip.
What a great time, man. You're so damn lucky. Very cool. I think that about hits everything except for this final one this guy wrote. It's your day, you soul sucking bitch. SSGN 729. Somebody, I don't know, they kept calling the subs bitch. And I didn't know if that was a term of endearment, but this guy obviously didn't like that sub.
Well, so being on a submarine is challenging. It's a hard, complex job, and people get have stress, and it's easy to say when you're looking at it from shore, that it's a wonderful experience, but it can be hard and challenging, and so sometimes people, vent their frustrations. But that's maybe what that was. I don't know. I'll look at it a different way. It was the guy talking about the enemy who's going to be sending those weapons.
No movie that has Sean Connery has ever been goofy. How dare you? I know I'm going to get in trouble. And Scott Glenn, thank you very much. John actually jumped in as well, Scott Glenn. And let's see. Jose said, served aboard USS Honolulu when Admiral Haney was the CO.
Yeah,
one of the best leaders
Admiral
in the
Haney,
Navy.
super guy. He actually he went and he was 4-star admiral, and was the Admiral at U.S. Strategic Command in charge of all of our nuclear forces.
Wow. Yeah, big guns right there.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that you want to pass on? Your daughter's Maddie's down in flight school. What is she vying for? What does she want?
Well, so she won't, tell me because she doesn't want to jinx it, I think. But my guess is that she wants to fly helicopters. But that's fine. And I'm angling for the P8, the anti-submarine warfare.
Yeah, listen, man, tell her do P8, get her wings, fly the P8. I'll get her hired at American. She'll have a great cozy job when she gets out. Mom and dad fly for free, right? She'll be set.
No, I know. But if how children are, if you tell
You
them
can't
something
tell
you
them,
want
right?
them to do, then they're going to do the complete polar opposite. So you
Yeah.
just keep your head down and
Hey, fly helicopters. That's going to be cool, man. I watch these videos of them landing on a destroyer as it's going like this, and they're walking the dog, and the helicopter gets pulled into the destroyer. That's so cool. I
yeah.
mean, golly, man.
So
Those guys.
here's a good story about Madeline and the competition that we're in. So I wear a flight suit for the Airborne Emergency Action Officer job. And I have to go through, the air survival training course to, basically the bare minimum, if you will. So she got her flight suit last fall as part of the, whatever process they do down at flight school.
AI. Yeah.
And so, so she when she got it, she looked at me and said, yeah, and I earned mine. You bought yours.
I like her already, man. That's all right. Well,
Exactly.
and so you're a hooker, man. I forgot to mention that. You got to land on an aircraft carrier.
I caught it on a number of times. So back prior to about 2005 or six, we did what was called coordinated operations, in which submarine operations were managed, from the carrier. So part of the job that I did in the reserves, my first job was I would fly out and was a submarine advisory team watch officer, and basically make sure we didn't shoot our own submarines and our submarines didn't run into each other. And so we caught it on and off, and that was an interesting COD carry onboard delivery vehicle. It's basically a 22 person, bus that lands on the aircraft.
But it makes you a true hooker now. You can go to tailhook, have a good old time.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Admiral. Hey, so how is it? I mean, how is it as a 2-star? Pretty good or lonely at the top?
I really like being on active duty, because you had scope of control authority and could get things done. It's harder as a part-time person because, you're basically strategic depth as opposed to actually, doing things. But I find my ways of adding value and
That's awesome.
I have a year left. We do 3 years as a 2-star, and that's about it. Can't go any further. There's one 3-star reserve, Admiral. That's the Chief of the Navy Reserve. Ironically, a fellow St. Stephen's person.
Really? Who's that?
John Mustin. But you know about the Mustins, the Mustin family of the Navy. The USS Mustin. So this is the
wow, that's heritage right there.
Yeah, exactly.
And you got to do 2 years active duty over in London, albeit it's COVID.
Yeah, so I did 7 months at the Pentagon as the vice director of the Navy staff on active duty, and then went to London as Commander Submarines NATO for 2 years.
What was your favorite thing over there? Did you guys get to do anything fun out there?
I mean, from the Navy perspective, or just personally? I mean,
Navy. Did you go on any Royal subs?
Well, so I went on the Greek submarine. I visited, but I had this big plan to go and visit all 13 countries, and then COVID hit. But I'd gone to Germany, Spain, Italy, Greece, and I've been to Denmark before. So, or the Netherlands, excuse me. And so I didn't get to go to Norway. That's my big regret on that one. But anyway.
Well, I tell you what, I go to Shanghai. Well, I used to go to Shanghai, and our hotel was right next to the submarine dry dock. I mean, I could look out my window and take pictures of the Chinese submarines. Probably illegal, shouldn't have, but you could take a spy could have a good old time with a big 300 telephoto lens in his hotel room if he wanted to, but because you overlooked our hotel, the river, and the subs, they pulled them out and moved them around. Kind of cool stuff,
Yeah,
man.
I, I, I probably wouldn't want to be flying to China as a military person.
Nah, you know what I used to do? I was in the reserves. I used to type up fake orders and stuff and stamp them top secret. And I'd go over there and crunch it up and throw it in my trash can. I'd go out, come back, my trash can was empty. There were chocolates on the pillow. They probably got my name. It was like fake troop transport orders, exercise, make up all sorts of crap. You sit in the S4 office and just make up fake shit, fake stuff, and then, hey man, give me that top secret stamp. You got that? Yeah. Here. Oh man, yeah, not having fun with the Chinese. Something's wrong. How about the North
Yeah.
Koreans? Their sub capabilities, are they challenging? Worthy aggressors? What would you consider those guys? Do you ever go up against them?
I have not. I've not. My time period has been at the Atlantic, but they're using very old platforms. Very very antiquated systems. So yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Listen, Andy, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and answering all my dumb questions. But you really have satisfied it because it's like when I talked to Chris Cassidy about space. Nobody talks about doing laundry up there. How do you do laundry? And I just saw a deal where they loaded 170 pounds of trash, and it's the first time they ever ejected a pod of trash back into the atmosphere. And I wondered about that with you guys. You got trash, you have compactors that makes noise. How do you handle all the
It's called
minutiae?
a trash disposal unit. You compact it, has weights in it, and it drops down, and it into the ocean. So
That's cool.
yeah. Hopefully, it degrades in a way that after some time it just gets corrodes away and
It's gone. Fish eat it, whatever.
exactly.
Well, is there anything else you would like to pass? Any good, funny stories, tricks that you used to play on the sub?
Not really. I mean, I think that people are very curious about the submarines, and one of the reasons that you don't hear about you hear in the public, probably 15% of what we actually do, and
Yeah.
the people in the submarine force are an amazing group of people. They are they do missions that are extremely complex, extremely important for national security, but you don't hear about them because we just can't tell you about them. And when you hear about us spending as much money as we are on the Columbia class submarine, it is because our number one thing is the strategic nuclear deterrence, and that is the fact that submarine will be able to have hopefully prevent a nuclear war. That's why we're spending that money. And strategic nuclear deterrence has worked for now a long time, and hopefully it continues to work in the future. So
Well, you guys will be certainly very important when we have little issues and spats over the Spartley Islands and things like that out there in the Pacific.
of course.
So, yeah, very much so.
Anyway,
Well,
thanks for inviting me. I hope it was enjoyable for the folks, and
I think
we'll
they loved it. Another great one. Seriously, very interesting. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it. Well, listen, to hang out for a minute, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll get right back up with you in here in a second.
Okay,
all right,
great. Thanks,
folks. Thanks again for joining Tall Tales with Taco. I hope you enjoyed Andy. That was a great conversation. I probably have about another 2 pages of really goofy questions, but that would keep us up for a few hours, and he is East Coast. Listen, thank you so much. Please hit like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and let everybody know you got to sign up for reminders because you never know who I'm going to have on board. Next week, we're actually still continuing a theme of naval history, and we're going to talk about a heavy cruiser that was out in the Pacific, and the guy that wrote the book. It's going to be a fantastic interview. I'm actually going to have my dad on for the first time because he's an engineer, and a lot of the engineering spaces and things that they talk about in that pertain to the World War II stuff was still in service while he was in. So it's going to be a fascinating conversation if you like naval history and especially World War II. Days of Steel Rain. It's just going to be really cool. You guys take care until I see you next week. Adios, hasta luego, a wiedersehen, tschüss, shesheni, au revoir, domo arigato gozaimasu, tando shinde kudasai, ciao, arrivederci, das vidania, assalamu alaikum, Nostrovia, Bovidjania. How about that? You guys have a good one. We'll see you next time.